Good morning. My name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm with the Melco's application team, and this is our Design Shop talk for the day, where we're here to answer your questions and see what we can help out with to make you, just improve your work. Okay, so it looks like y'all can see me. Sorry, I'm on a site all by myself, so it just makes it interesting to make sure everyone's seeing the comments. All right, hi there, David and Hal. So today, you guys go ahead and type in whatever questions you may have, and I'll try to keep an eye on that as we go. And in the meantime, I had asked before, well, where did it go? Okay, so I had asked before online about what questions people may have, so I went ahead and created this little PowerPoint just so I can keep organized more than anything else to show. Nope, that doesn't work. All right, to what questions we have. So we'll start off with that, and then as you add questions, we will address them. So there was one about how do we create default settings for future use. So let's go back and look at that. So whenever you're changing your defaults, whatever they may be, you want to start with a brand new project. And the reason that is, if you are working in an existing if you're starting with an open file, that might not be what your current defaults are. So it's always good, so you can see what you're doing, good morning, to go ahead and start from a brand new file. Once you do that, I usually right click on the lettering element, and it's just out of habit, and that will bring up your object property box. From here, you change whatever it is you want to change. Okay, so let's say you don't want this as your default font. You want one of the blocks, maybe block 2. I'm just changing it to change it. Maybe you don't like using auto density. You'd rather set a specific density. You're gonna if you want auto underlay, or if you want to set your own underlay, you can do that. I go ahead and put 1 point of pull offset as a bare minimum on everything because embroidery shrinks, so might as well compensate for it. And then tie-ins, tie-outs, whatever it may be. Once you're done, here you can click Save Current Settings to Defaults, and you'll see it says for the current document only or defaults permanently. Saving it to the defaults permanently, now that is what's going to set it up so that when you start a new file in the future, these will now be your current settings. So all the things I just changed will now be my defaults. All right, so that saves them here. Now you also have other things down here that you can create. Honestly, I haven't used them a whole lot of creating styles. So let's see, where you can come in and set up properties for whatever it is you're working on there and set the styles, create your own specific style on there, and then you can then select it here as an option for setting your properties and of what you're applying it to. So there was another question on how can you, save it for a specific type of element and then just apply it. Well, this would be one way you could do that. So you could say, well, it's for the whole project, defaults, or just for a selection. And you could then hit apply for there. So that's another option you have. All right. So that's one question we have. How do you get settings to work in vectors? And then that other question I have. Okay, so there was a question that should answer this one on how we create settings, and then this one as well from Edith on how we save them. So we've got both of those. This one's easy, so I'm going to quick answer that. If you have RGB thread colors and add them to the master file, is that file overwritten when DS is updated and loaded? Yes, it is. So if you make customizations to any of the setting files, whether it be your thread colors or your hoop database, whatever it is, if you want to keep that, you need to copy and save the file as a different name, because when it updates, it's going to replace it. It's always just a good idea to keep any data you want out of the system file names and copy it and paste it in, so that way later updates you can always go add it back. All right. So that was one. The Trapunto question we'll come back to in a second. All right, so let's look at a few questions that people have already typed in. I'm trying to smooth out circles that look like octagons by one at a time, changing points from straight to curve. Is there a way to go about selecting all and changing the points all together? Let's see. All right, so if I draw a circle, All right, so I've got a circle. I'm going to mess it up. All right. So I think this is what you're saying. You've got, so I'm just quick messing it up so we have something to talk to. All right, so you want to change all your triangle points to curved points, I believe is what you want. So you should, if I double click on them, nope. I don't think you can, actually, because I think you'd have to select them one at a time. If you double click on the point, then it pops up, but if you select more than 1 point, it brings up the property box. So no, but if you haven't seen this trick, let me show you that. If I delete these 4 points, all right, so I'm deleting the middle point, so it's really just a box at this point. Oh, I'll show you that in a minute, the perfect circle. What you can do is if I hold the control key as I select and move this point, it'll make it a perfect arch. So if you have a box, you can always hold control and hold the control key while you drag your point, and it will make it a perfect arch from that point. So that's one option you always have. Okay, so there's that. There was a question on how to create a perfect circle. I see that that was typed in. What did I do? Well, I did a walk input. This works for walk, works for the single lines, for the complex fills, whatever. So whatever, up here you select whatever element you're going to use, and then you'll notice down here we have a circle, we have a rectangle, and then this weird stuff. So I'm going to click on that circle. So from here, this is where I'm going across the diameter. I can do click 1, click 2, and that gives me an oval just by dragging my mouse. To lock it to a circle, I hold the shift key. Okay. All right. Morris, I have that on the list. I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to look at it. We might send you a note later after we're done, because I'm going to play around with some things and talk to the guys, see if there's a way that I'm just not thinking of on the fly. Okay. So again, what I did there, select 2 points, held the shift key, left click and drag, and that makes a perfect circle. And it really doesn't matter what order you go in. You can do it for circles. You can do it for the single lines. You can do it for your fills. So select that. 2 points, hold the shift. I've got a perfect fill now. Okay. So that will give you circles to your heart's content. And if you've not used the rectangle one, it works the same way. So click and click will draw a rectangle for you. If you hold the shift key, it locks it to a square, you know, same size as X and Y for each side. So shift hold locks that for you. Okay. Working with keyboard lettering like Cooper Black, is there a way to eliminate the really tiny stitches in the beginning of a letter? Are you talking about the tie-in stitches? Is that what you're referring to? I'll wait to see. All right. While I wait for that, let's see what other questions were sent beforehand. So we did all those. I'll come back to Jill. Sorry, Jill. We'll come back. This one's easy. So if you have a birth announcement, or basically an EXP file or a DST or something like that, how do you add text? All right. Well, first off, you open up whatever file it is you want to add to. So I'm going to go to my C drive. I have an EXP. It's the 1 day. Sorry. I know not everyone likes looking at that one, but that's an EXP file. I just saved it off a while back. All right. So I've got an EXP file of the 1 day. So this would be your birth announcement, so whatever you have anywhere. So you'll have blanks where you'll put the name, the weight, and all that. So here, you would click on lettering, click on the screen, you would type out the name you want. And then wherever your next element would go, you would type in, you know, 8 ounces, whatever. You just keep on adding along your design, wherever it is, to add the text to it. You can do any editing you can do with text, you can do on these now. So I can come in and change the sizes, I can change the font, if I want to go with a more scripted font, whatever it might be. You can modify those to match, you know, the style of what you're looking for. All right. So once you're done with that, you did File, Save As, and I usually just save them as OFM files. If you want to save it back as an EXP, you can, but you would save it off, load it to your machine, and you're good to go. The only other thing to kind of consider is what order is it going to sew in. So that's just depending on the design that you started with. You just think logically about it. Do you want to add that text, between colors, at the top, at the bottom, wherever it needs to go. All right. All right, so there's that one. What else did we have? Oh, this isn't, all right. I gotta do something to keep track of what I've answered. There, did that. The Boolean operations, again, that's another easy one. Let's quick do that. So with the Booleans, what that is how can you add or subtract from different shapes? Okay, so if I have a fill, so I'm gonna do a circle, and then I'm gonna draw a square, a rectangle. All right, so I've got two shapes overlapping. Okay, and what if I want to combine those or create an intersection or different things like that? Actually, I'm going to draw one more. All right, so I've got some shapes drawn. So if I'm going to combine them, I select the elements I want to merge. So to do that, I selected the first one, I held my Control key down, and selected the second one. Now from there, notice up here you have some buttons that appear. It's near where all these align features are. Sometimes it's over on the right, wherever you have it. Mine's over here. The other way you can get to that is right click, go to operations, and they're there as well. Combine elements or subtract elements. So I'm going to combine elements. So now that's one shape and the overlap's gone, so it's one fill area. Well, if I want to remove, so subtract, you would select whatever it is you're trying to subtract from, select the second one, and then you'd say subtract element. So now I've got this shape with the cutout, so that overlap is gone. Okay? So it's just a matter of selecting which one you select first. So if you're going to combine, subtract, if you have things overlapped, you can copy and paste and subtract them the opposite direction. In other words, choose one element first, the second, hit subtract, and then do it the opposite way, and that gets you the intersection. All right, so that's kind of like your Boolean operations, at least is how I understood it. Okay. Let's see, when doing an arch, at the end of the arch it goes to a fill. How do I keep it to be a satin? Use fill for stitch lines greater than? Yes. So let's see if I understand your question. Let's start with that. I'm not even sure if you're on here, so I'll just pretend. All right, so if you have an arch, I assume you mean an arch, something like that, or maybe you're talking more of a column. Maybe that's what you're referring to. All right, maybe that's what you're referring to, where it's going from a fill to satin back to fill. Anytime you have that, what you need to do is look at your properties of the shape. And in this case, if I go measure that, I'm guessing this is way too large for me to really want to do that. Yeah, it's 198 points. So I don't want to do this as a satin. So what I'm going to show you, I should probably make it smaller so it's not quite that. I'm going to make it smaller so I don't show bad practices. All right, so there we go. So we have a little bit of fill on the end, a little bit of fill on that end. And if I go measure them, they're probably just a little bit larger than 60 or 70. They're still too big, but that's okay. So what you would do is you'd right click, go to properties, or double click on it, whichever it is. And under your stitch type, you have stitch type of satin. This number right here is what's controlling whether you have satin or fill. Okay, so I don't know, it helps me to at least understand what it's doing. So what that's saying is use satin stitch until my stitches get longer than this, because satin stitches have a limited practical length of what you should safely do. Because if you think about it, if you've got a 1-inch piece of thread dragged across somewhere and on a left chest pocket, and you've got these really long satin stitches, well, as one, it's going to look loose as the fabric moves, so it's not the best look. But on top of that, as pens or pencils or just wear and tear in the laundry as things go by it, it's going to snag those threads because they're really long and not secured down the middle or, you know, at more closer lengths. So this is kind of your protection against accidentally having really long stitches. So if I measure from one side of the element to the other, you can see that's, what, 67 points. By the time I get down here, we're at 75 points, which is larger than this number, which is why that turned into a satin stitch. So, or a fill stitch, excuse me. So if you want to, you can increase this size. Now, just be very careful when you're doing that you're thinking about the application. The software defaults to that number being 60. So it will have, once this stitch length gets over 60 points, it converts it to a fill, like you see here. All right. I don't do it personally. I don't do anything larger than 70 because that's already bordering on a 1/4 of an inch, and it's already getting where it's pretty long and already going to be susceptible to snagging. So I would just suggest saying between 60 and 70 or lower is satin stitches. Above that, go to a fill. So how would you fix this if you still had fill and didn't like it? Well, you can narrow it up some. That would be one, right? And play with that some to get these stitches a little smaller. You can try different fills, play with randomness, things like that to try to get that to even out better to your liking. All right. Did that help? Hopefully. That was from Ben. Let's see. I have a couple of letters that I need to edit in the DS fonts I use frequently. Can you hire someone to do that? I guess. You'd have to, what I would suggest is checking with you can send an email to the application team. I know they have, Melco has different things, services you can buy on their, on the web. I'm not sure if this is one of them. So I don't know if Scott or any of them can comment in the comments, but we'll find out for you. How about that? Otherwise, if you know how to edit them, what you could do is, you know, whatever letter you want, you can go into that either the alphabet editor or here, and you can right click, go to wireframe editing, and make the changes you want. So that's another way you can modify lettering. So modify your wireframe and then go for it. All right. Only coloring them so I can keep track of what I've talked about. All right. Any other questions so far before I keep going? These are all done. Okay. Trapunto. Photo fill. Joshua, I'm not. So that would probably be a whole session in itself. I'm going to talk to Nate and the rest of the application team, Scott and everyone, and we'll see if we can figure out how to do that one in a manner that's, so I'll put that on the list for us to talk about. All right, so sorry, I'm not going to answer that one today because that's a big topic just in itself. So there was another question that said, I have a thin accent line to add. Style 1 gets too bulky. Should I reduce the number of tie-in stitches? How low can you go and still stay secure? Is a manual tie an option, and how? Yes, you can do manual ties. So let's start with that one. So manual ties, you can do a few different ways. One, you can just plan them in, or you can create your own tie stitches. So if you use the manual stitch, and you can come in and digitize whatever tie type you want. So it's, whatever you find works for you. Everywhere you click when using a manual stitch is where it's going to have a needle penetration, nowhere between there. So if you, want to create something like that, maybe, I don't know, whatever it's going to be, you can then, I'm going to turn this all off because we don't need it for what we're doing. Okay. All right, so if you create your manual stitch, whatever it might be, you can right-click, go to Save Custom Shape, say Custom Tie, and then give it a name and save it as a tie stitch. Okay, once you do that, that tie stitch will now appear in the list here. So you can see I've got one that I always overwrite just when I'm showing people how to do this. So you can create whatever you want, and now by setting it as a tie type, it will show up here. Okay, so that would be one option you have. I know there's some folks who don't even use the knots, they do them manually. So that's literally where you would have all your tie-ins and tie-offs, or whichever one's bothering you, on an element turned off, and the first few stitches prior to going in would be you deciding how to do the lock stitch. That works as long as you think about how you're doing it and test out and make sure it's actually locking down the thread so that you're getting overlap and it's actually going to stay secure. Okay, so it's a lock stitch and not just stitching on the screen. As far as reducing the bulk of it, you know, the size, that's just from stitch to stitch. How many stitches you might be able to reduce a little bit, I guess. I don't know if Scott has any guidance that we can type in for you later, but the style 1 is actually a pretty narrow, like a pretty small tie-in. So let me see the properties on that one. Tie-in. So the number of stitches, that's just how many passes. So number of stitches would be like a bean stitch, right? So for 3 is what it will end up, the bulkiness looking like. So you can go up. Honestly, I don't think I'd go much less than 3. That's just me, though. So, all right. What other questions do we have? Okay, got those. We talked about that. Oh, can you have DesignShop on more than one device? Kind of. You can install DesignShop on a bunch, you know, whatever you want, but you can only have one. You can have only one activated at a time. So if you have one license, so one serial number, you can have it on one computer. If you need to use it on a different computer, you would deactivate it from the one you're working on, go to your other computer where it's also installed and activate it. I know folks who, you know, have a shop and then they also do digitizing at home, so they have it installed on both computers. Just before they leave work, they deactivate, they go home, they activate, do whatever they're going to do. Before they go in for the day, deactivate. You know, you got to keep track of it, of what you're activating and deactivating. So it's something to think about anyway. All right. Let's see. All right, let's go to Trapunto. Jill. So, software always crashing when rotating. What's another way to rotate prior to sending the machine? What software is crashing, the OS or DesignShop? If you can type that in, I can kind of help with that. All right. So for Trapunto, that's the look you have here. The question was, you know, I'm trying to get this Trapunto look like this, but it looks like it's doubling and a little bolder in one area. So what do we do for that? Well, if I had to guess, Jill, in OS, okay. If I had to guess, that's happening because of starts and stops of where they're located. So your start and stop is somewhere along here. So what happens is it sews and then it's coming back over itself. That would be my guess. But let's look at different ways we can create this to avoid that. Okay. So you've got a few options when you're dealing with Trapunto type things. All right. So if I have a fill, and there's a lot of ways to do this. I doubt I'll cover them all. All right, so let's say we've got our start, oops, cancel that, my stop up there, my start down here. Okay, so it's going to sew this way. I'm going to change my stitch direction to this, although where's the other one? There it is, delete it. All right, so we've got this in here. So what are ways we can create that kind of open fill? Well, if I come into the properties, I can always change it to decorative. And from decorative, you can create your own, or you can always use ones that are in the software that are, you know, it's different types. There's a whole bunch of different patterns you can use. And that will create, you know, different decoratives, if you will, on your Trapunto area. Okay. So you can see when you do this, notice there's these lines, boxes, whatever you want to call them, handles. You can move those around to adjust the spacing on all this. So be sure to play with them and see what they do. You might get a look that's a little bit different that you like better. Okay, so you've got that to do a fill. So that's one way we can do it. All right, what's another way we could? Well, if I come down again, I'm going to create a shape. Ugh, it's hardly a shape at all. There we go. Oops. Do it again. All right, so I've got my shape again. I'm going to change my start and stop, or actually I can leave it, I guess. So another way we could do it is if you go into the object properties, well, you have underlay and you have fill. So if you don't know the difference, that would be a good thing to understand too. So your underlay sews first, and then your top stitching sews second. So if you want to make this just a straight crosshatch, how can you do that? Well, you'd use a combo of your underlay and your top stitching to do it. So I can come over here and set this to something big. So I'm going to just say 30 for my density, and let's see what that gets. All right, so that gives me something. Then I can come to my underlay and only have one underlay, all right, with an angle of 90 relative to the top stitching, and the density the same as the first one I had, and a border margin of 0. Okay, so what did that do? Well, that gave me my squares, similar to what you had, Jill. And it goes all the way to the edge, so we're good. Now there's some cleanup stuff we have to think about anyway. So if you look here, these edges aren't exactly the cleanest. So as it runs, you know, it sews, it jumps down to the next row, you get these angles at the end, these connectors. So to get rid of those, under the top stitching tab, you can always click on Trapunto, and that will force the stitching to go to the end of the wireframe before it moves down a row and goes over. Now, when you have your starts and stops in the middle or in weird places, interesting things can happen, right? So if I put that there, look what will happen. It's going to sew, and then it comes back over itself. So this one might not be the best example of how this is going to work, but let's see. So it sews down, then what does it do? Oh, my end point. I didn't move my end point. All right, let's move the end point. Oh, there. All right, so what you might end up having, Jill, is where your starts and stops are, it's going back over itself possibly. So it's got to end up there, so it's going to have to sew back over sections, okay? And with stuff, it's going to shift around, so you might get that kind of double look, or just the fact that you have multiple lines on top of each other. I would have to look at your design, to your actual file, to be able to tell you why it's happening, but that would be my guess, that it has to do with where your starts and stops are. Now, you can always just go into digitizing these as straight lines, you know, literally programming your lines, and then you can control exactly where everything starts and stops and how many passes it's over each location and things like that. It takes more time. I like using this as an option too, just whatever the different decoratives are. And you can even create your own decoratives on here. All right, so they said the software is always crashing when rotating. Is there another way to rotate prior to sending to the machine? Yes, that's actually what I do. I rotate in DesignShop and save it that way before I go to the machine, mainly because I forget to rotate it when I'm on the machine, and then I have stuff sewn upside down. So, oh yeah, fill overlap lines. Sorry, Scott, there we go. So that was under advanced fill overlap lines right here. So that's the other thing to check, Jill, where you have fill overlap lines. How many lines is it going to go overlap? All right, so that might be another area to look at. All right. All right, so how to rotate? Well, the quickest way to do a rotation, I'm just going to close this stuff and start a new file. Okay. I created a bunch of junk files, sorry. All right, so I'm going to start a new file, and whatever text is easy. Okay, so whatever your design is that you want to rotate, there's multiple ways to do it. If you're just trying to flip it upside down before you send it to the machine, the fastest way to do that are these two buttons right here. You would select your entire design over here, and then you have two buttons. You've got a mirror horizontally, mirror vertically. It doesn't matter what order you click them in, just click them back to back. So I select my entire design, mirror it one way, then mirror it vertically. So I did vertically, then horizontally. That's 180-degree rotation. I can save it now. So that's the quickest. Just click the 2 buttons and you're done. Another way you can do that is down here you have a W and an H. So it doesn't matter which, they both take you to the same screen. Okay, so you left click on the W, you left click on the H, the same little box will pop up. Well, if I want 180-degree rotation, I can type in 180 degrees. Or maybe I want 45. I can type in 45. Okay, maybe at this point I want 90. So you can type in numbers and rotate by number down here. Now keep in mind you can also do negative numbers, so I can do negative 45 and then do a 90 or negative 90. So positive and negative numbers, letters don't work, things like that. So let's see. So that would be another way to rotate. Yet another way is within DesignShop, I can right click, I can go to scale, and position is right here. So I can go change the rotation by number here, or the orientation, which is similar to the F you see in OS in the operating system. So you can click this and it gives you 90 degrees, 180, so you can actually see what it's going to do. Okay, so that's yet another way to rotate. Well, one last would be you can just, let me put it back to normal. All right, another way is to rotate it just on the screen. So if I select the shape, you'll see by selecting the shape, you have these black handles. The black handles are scale mode. So if I left click and drag, it'll scale it. Okay, well, if I want to rotate, I need to change those solid handles to hollow ones. So to do that, I select the shape again. So to do that, left click on it, left click again. Now I have hollow handles. So with the hollow handles, I can now left click and drag and rotate. Okay. How did you get 2 elements? Property scale. So right here. So you select your shape, right click, go to scale, and then under position, so it's the scale one, takes you to that element. So right click, scale, takes you to elements. Then you have your position, which gives you your rotation right here. Okay, I always just do it with these buttons because it's quickest, or left click on the W or the H and type in whatever number I'm going to. Okay, let's see, what other questions do we have? So Jill, I hope that helps with the Trapunto. Okay, we did that. We talked about those. Yes, we talked about that. This one is probably an entire just like little seminar in itself. Yeah, so so there was a question that basically on how do we optimize our work process to get the best use out of your machines when you're doing personalization, essentially. There's more to it than that, but when you're doing a whole lot of items that are short runs, how can you use your equipment efficiently to keep running? So if you've got, let's say, 100 orders you need to do in a day, you're using 3-4 machines, how do you decide how to parse it? How do you create the files and get them loading fast so it's just hoop and go kind of things? There are a bunch of ways to do that, and it really comes down to what works in your shop. But there are things like the design queue and a master queue. So I don't have OS installed on this computer. I'll have to fix that for next time. But in OS, there's an option where you can put a design queue in there where you can send all your files over into pending, right? So you send them over and it will create an entire list of files you want run. If you're running multiples, you can, like you need 2 of one name, other things like that. You can input them and it will then create a list that you can load. Just click on it. So when you're at a machine, click, hit load. Or there's even under settings where you can tell it to auto load. So that's another one where it'll, when a machine ends, it will prompt you to ask, do you want to load the next file? You say yes, it'll automatically load the next file for you. So then you can just hit and go. So that would be one. You can always use group names, which is another one. If you haven't used those, I know they've done a few Facebooks on that, so there should be videos on how to use group names, but I'll quick show you. So right here, you have group names, right? So what you would do is create whatever text you want. Oh, actually, let me open up another file. I already have this set up. Quick access. Okay. Okay. I thought I did anyway. Oh yeah. All right. So on whatever text, you would create whatever text you want. Okay. On there, you would then go into group names, enable the group names, take whatever names you want. You can input them, import them from Excels, from, different files, things like that. Or just type them in, hit add. They'll all appear here. Move them over into the selected side. So if I don't want the name Sam, I move it over. If I want it, I would select the name and move it over. So now I've got the name that I want. And you'll see it only shows up as one name. All right. The other thing, look in the properties, you'll see how is it going to run? Design, name, repeat. So what does that mean? It's going to sew my design, which happens to be this bird. Then it's going to sew the name, and then it's going to repeat. All right. So you can see I've got 5 color changes, but remember we had this set up for 4 names. All right. So what happens? If I save this off, you don't have to do this. I just save it off as the other files type so that you can see what it's actually creating. Yeah, whatever. All right. Ah, bugger. I didn't let it save before I went to open. Sorry. Okay. Group names. Design. So you can tell it how to export. So in this case, what it did is it sews everything out at once. All right. So you would only load one file. When you set it up on your machine, you set it up as 5 color changes, and then you would have a hold or an applique stop, whatever it is you're doing for that. So what that ends up doing is you hoop your first item, you load it on the machine, you sew the design and the first name. That one's done. So you pull it off the machine, take your next item, put it on the machine. So now you've got another blank item, and you hit start again, and then it will sew this. All right. Well, again, that one's done. It finished the same 5 colors. It would now be waiting for you. You'd remove the hoop, put the next garment on, and then you'd run your next. You just keep repeating through until it gets to the end. So it's not like you're going to run the one file over and over and over and over and over on the one garment. You're going to be replacing it. All right, so you can also tell it to output differently when you're creating them, where it creates different files. So using group names is one way you can do it, where you can actually put the names in the order you want them to sew, and which would match your packing slips or whatever you're wanting to do, and you would just pile through them. All right. Now, if you're doing multiple machines, though, you'd have to keep track of what's on what machine, so that might be not exactly what you want to do. Another way you can do it is to use the barcode scanning feature of it. It's pretty neat. When you create files, you can set it up so that they have your barcodes assigned to them. Okay, and it's in the manual of how you set it up. I use it personally in my shop. But what ends up happening is you put all your files in one folder. You make sure the software is set up where it knows where it's going to go. You take your barcode, you scan the name, or scan the file that you want run. It loads it to the machine you have selected. You go. Then you scan the next one. It'll load that and go. So you can also do it that way, where you're barcodes are tied to the order you want it to sew. So whatever machine you go to, you click on, scan it, it'll load the file for you. So that would be another way to do it. So I got that question right before we started, so I didn't read it in complete detail, so I need to go back and I'll reply in a message, in an email later. So hopefully that helps some anyway, or at least gives you some things to think about. What other questions did we have? Any? I don't see any others typed in. Okay. Well, if that's all we had, I guess we'll lost your video and audio. It should be recorded that you can watch later. So it should be up there. I'll check the video before it's done. It looks like I still have audio. All right, everyone. I don't see any other questions being typed in yet. So if you have questions, feel free to send them in. I think the email's I think it's applications@melco.com. I don't know that for a fact. We'll get it typed into the comments on this video. So if you have questions, feel free to email them in, type them in. We'll try to address them at the next one. And have fun. Let us know if we can help answer any questions for you. All right. And again, my name is Samantha. We're doing these pretty much every week, I believe. All right. All right. Well, I will talk to you guys next time. Yeah. Okay. So applications@melco.com is the correct one. All right. Great. So you're welcome, everyone, and I'll talk to you next time. Hope this was helpful for you. Bye.